Welcome back to Coaches Exploring the Untethered Soul, a book by Michael A. Singer. This is a continuation of the programs that we've done. If you're not familiar with them, we did Coaches Exploring Clarity and Coaches Exploring the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We also dabbled in Coaches Exploring Songs. And now we're back with this book. Three of us, I guess, had been talking about this for a number of weeks now. It's funny how I think each of us had come to this book separately, and I think, Elaine, you'd read this years ago or a long time ago. I only discovered it recently. And we all discovered that we all have a love for this book, and there's so much, insight and wisdom to be had from this book. So we thought this would be a great one pick up and to explore and share with all of our viewers and listeners. So this is The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself, Michael A. Singer. And like usual, we'll start from the top, and over the course of this program, we'll be going through kind of chapter by chapter and sharing our insights. But I'll just read, there's a Shakespeare quote at the very beginning of the introduction. This goes like this. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. William Shakespeare. To thine own self be true. I feel like I should say amen or something.
You can.
Anyway, this book is, having studied, or I don't know, trained, whatever you want to call it, with you guys and in the 3 principles, Cindy Banks, Jamie Smart world for the last number of years. I've been very, very familiar with the notion of like discovering who you really are and the power that lies in that discovery. And I don't know, the way that Michael Singer explains that throughout this book has just been, I don't know, life altering. Like it's just a whole nother way of explaining it and seeing it in a way that is, I don't know, for me anyway, irrefutably true and easy to experience and go, oh yeah, that is true. I do hear that voice in my head, and I'm the one who's hearing it. Things like that. So we'll get into all that. But I've really enjoyed this book.
It's, to me, it's a huge question, is it not? He says halfway down the first paragraph, after all, to which self are we to be true? Like, and that kind of stops you in your tracks, especially thinking of maybe before I even encountered the works of Sydney Banks and encountered the man Jamie Smart or Michael Neal themselves. And isn't that a great question to actually ask people? I remember many years ago, after a failed marriage, and I was waltzing through the stalls of a little market area here in Turin, where I live. And I bought myself, no, it's not this one, sorry, it's this one, this ring. It cost me 4,000 of the old lira. That's about like tuppence. Okay, that's about how much that is. And it'll be something like €2 now. And I proudly put it on my finger. And I said, from now on, looking back at the mistakes I've made, at perhaps what I felt was an error, was some misgiving or some lack of knowledge or about what had gone wrong with my married life, let's say. So I stuck this ring on my finger and said, well, I've decided that the only person who I'm really going to be true to is myself. But I didn't really know what that meant until I met the three principles, or met, Jamie Smart, or the works of Sid Banks, and now the very question in this book. Well, who am I being true to? And therein, just reading that single sentence, it took me a good another sort of 30 minutes to come away from it, because my thought then went off exactly how Michael Singer describes into a whole series of other issues. So again, sort of all these little voices coming into my head and rattling on, and then a little bit later on, he says, well, you're the one that's watching that's observing that. And I sort of went, oh, yes.
Well, even in your sentence of, I decided to be true to myself. It's like, who are you talking about when you say I? And who are you talking about when you say myself?
Back to the question, who am I after all that?
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I highlighted this line where it says on page 3, we will indeed turn to a single source that has phenomenal direct knowledge on the subject. We will turn to one expert who, for every moment of every day of their life, has been collecting the data necessary to finally put this great inquiry to rest. And that expert is you.
I really heard that loud and clear when I started listening to this, because of course you pick up a book like this and there's still some expectation that this is going to tell you something. And like, oh, like I have to find it for myself. I have it.
That's what I mean. And when I read that, I hear Jamie's words kind of ringing out in my ears, going, I'm not here to convince you of anything, or to check with your own experience. And that's kind of what Singer's pointing to too. Like, it's Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. It's, this is for each of us to explore and find on our own. And it says, he says, you can't fail at this, because yourself is what you are at all times and in all places. And it's like, and I take that for myself, but also when I'm working with clients, it's like, when you're pointing them in this direction of the untethered soul or of the principles, it's for them to, like you just said, Lynne, find out for themselves, and knowing that they have the capacity to do that. And the truth is there to be discovered.
Yeah. Also, the sort of persistent. I remember we did at some point mention, in Jamie's book, how come is it he says this same thing? Every page he seems to repeat the same thing, and I find that in some way Michael Singer does this as well. He's beating the same nail on the same head, and he says it in numerous different ways. So over and beyond that, I love the way that he, he's always playing off like the very normal human being side, with all of its misunderstandings and upsets and difficulties and questions and private interrogations that we seem to have with ourselves. Why do I do this? Why do I not do it? Why haven't I done it yet? And when will I do it? And all the rest of it. And how he just puts it into such plain, simple language that you can immediately grasp. Oh, I do that all the time. Oh my goodness. And
that's me.
It's just sort of over and beyond the content, the style that he writes in, and the way that it's so easy to read, and how somehow, as he'll say, on the one hand, he'll he'll say, well, yeah, we do this, don't we? And he'll make the example, like whether it's further on, Tom talking to himself about whether he should or not go to some appointment or something, I think something like that. And then so it takes the seriousness out of it. Because indeed there is some aspect in the real you, I think, of lightness and joy and laughter and fun and resilience and warmth, and he just points right to that side, which is already you, in a kind of humorous way, which I really enjoyed reading.
Yeah, I think also that's, I felt the same, Elaine. And what, to even go a little bit beyond that, what I found when I started reading it, I laughed a lot through this book. And what I found as I was reading it was, in laughing at the stories, recognizing that when the story is going on for me, so if I was up in my head doing those things, some of the examples pretty similar that he gives, I'm like, oh, I probably wasn't laughing at that at the time. And then that makes it even funnier. You're like, how funny is that? That I was taking that seriously, or I mean, some of the examples when he starts off and he started a thread at, say, 2:00 in the afternoon, and then he's waking up at 3:00 in the morning and the thread starts going again. I'm like, well, that's me often, but I'm taking that kind of seriously. And, reading this, it just made me laugh, going, this is what's going on all the time in one form or another. And, to go back to that, which self, when he says, is it the self who's in a low mood or a good mood or a funny mood or a sad mood or this mood or that mood? You're like, you don't, which way am I going to look? Which mood am I paying attention to? Which self is that? Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It is brilliantly written.
The last part of the introduction, I highlighted a couple things. It says the only requirement asked of you is the willingness to honestly look at yourself in the most natural, intuitive manner. Once refocused, you will realize that you not only have the ability to find yourself, you have the ability to free yourself.
Yeah, he talks about freeing yourself quite a lot. There are lots of tips on freeing yourself as we go through.
Which again is another concept which is sometimes difficult to understand, I think. Like, what exactly does that mean? Freeing yourself. Well, if freeing yourself, like you yourself can also be kind of worrying, because, well, I don't want to be free from me because I need me to be going along, so what does that mean, kind of thing. And then it becomes, I think as you go on, it becomes very clear. But on a
I think it's in his book. He talks about, being like a caged tiger or something, but like, getting it so accustomed to being locked up. Like we don't want to be free. It's scary out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. On to part 1, Awakening Consciousness. Chapter 1, The Voice Inside Your Head. Show of hands, who has a voice inside their head? me too.
Trying to get my feet up there as well.
Yeah.
If only it were only one.
A chorus inside your head. Yeah.
I mean, he grips you right from the start. I mean, this is where I started laughing when I started reading it again. Just that very first paragraph, it just makes you laugh because it's altogether so true. It's the mental dialogue going on inside your head that never stops. It just keeps going and going. It's like, it's constant. It's a constant thing.
Yeah.
And how difficult it is to, at least for me, I've always, most of the time and most of my life, stayed away from tools, strategies, techniques as meditation or mindfulness, because I might find that beautiful space of emptiness. And that is, as you were saying before, Greg, that's pretty scary. until you know that it's okay to be there. And it seems almost an automatic process to, at least for me, to want to fill it up with something. So like anything will do to fill it up. And how interesting, when you are filling up your mind, it's usually nonsense most of the time. Like we don't seem to be able to fill it up with something useful, like, I don't know, quantum physics or something like that. No, it's kind of nonsense, you know, what's my next door neighbor doing kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for most of us, and for myself too, spend most of my life thinking I was that voice in my head. Like that was me. That was, not only was it me, that was like the most important part of me, and the smartest part, and the part to listen to, and so on. It's funny that in the very first thing he says, you know, shoot, I can't remember her name, blah blah blah. But I was thinking, you know, even just coming on a call like this, it's like, oh shit, where's the link? What time is it? Am I late? Am I on time? How's my hair? What's my lighting? Like, you know, you can, you know, I can think of thousands of examples of all this kind of stuff. Where's my book? Did I read, you know, what chapter are we doing? Am I going to have anything to say? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh yeah, there he is.
There he is. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. You just said it. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah.
I highlighted the sentence here. It says, if you spend some time observing this mental voice, the first thing you will notice is that it never shuts up.
Yeah, and I think before or after that, just still on the first page of chapter 1, the bit I underlined was, you know, and I don't have any voice inside my head. That's the voice we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because at one point I said, nah, it's not that. I'm kind of sad. It's not that bad. Yeah. Well, I don't do that.
Why is it talking? It's you who's talking, and it's you who's listening. And then the voice argues with itself. And who's it arguing with? Who could it possibly be with? It gets very confusing. It's like, yeah. That's what jumped out at me in reading this too, is the truth of the silliness of the voice in your head, how it takes one position, then it takes the opposite position, and then back to the other position. It's like, who, like it just said there, who's it arguing with? It's arguing with itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and which one are we supposed to pay attention to? Which one do we choose to pay attention to? Yeah.
It's exhausting, isn't it?
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And just that back and forth itself. And he says, you know, what am I doing? I can't get to sleep. You know, it's no wonder you can't sleep. And you've got this, because all you're doing, it is, you can see the picture of actually somebody lying in bed, and they turn onto one side, then onto the other, then they're on their backs, and then they might get up and have a drink or something and have some water, and then they turn over again, or then you put your head under the cover, and then you turn around again. And that indeed, that all we're trying to do at that moment in time is, as he says, you know, if you watch carefully, you see that it's just trying to find a comfortable place to rest.
Yeah.
But even when it finds the comfortable, so we finally get into bed kind of thing, it doesn't even quiet down the voice. You know, it just it doesn't even quiet down when it finds out that it's wrong.
When you said it's exhausting, the image that came to my mind was like a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to be on the wheel with the hamster being that voice in your head, it's exhausting because you're trying to keep up with it.
Yeah.
But once you realize, you know, you're the one who hears the voice, you're the one who notices that it's talking. If you can get off the wheel and you can just sit in a comfortable chair and watch the hamster, watch it run all day, that's not exhausting at all for you.
Yeah. My image was more of like somebody having a boxing match, you know, but it's like having your own boxing match.
Yeah.
You know, and you're trying to win the fight.
Yeah.
But of course you can't.
Yeah.
Because it's you that's fighting, or parts of you that are fighting.
Jamie shared a video. It was a comedian who did a thing where he was wrestling himself. And I'll find it on YouTube, but he's like in a little ring, and he's like, and the commentator going, oh, and now the left arm, and he's like grabbing himself, and he's flipping himself on the ground. And at the time I thought, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like, I didn't see the humor in it, but the image of it came back to me and now it just did again when you were talking about it, about that's a metaphor for basically what's going on in our minds all the time.
The struggle.
Is this and how absurd it is when you think about, like,
Yeah.
a wrestling match between one person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love it when it goes on to, take that out and imagine it's a whole other person. If you took it out,
Yeah, how long would that last?
how long would that last?
Oh yeah. I mean, that would be an immediate break, like you might think you have a friend in there.
Yeah.
But like that's the end of the friendship once you've taken it out of there.
That would, for me, the image I thought was like, oh, that's when you do the fake phone call. Oh, hang on, I got to call. Oh, I have to go home now. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a line here. There's nothing more important to true growth than realizing that you are not the voice of the mind. You are the one who hears it. And ever since I read that line, or listened to this chapter a number of times, every time I'm in a pickle, I'm like, hang on. Is this the
What's
voice
going on here?
or is this me?
Yeah.
And guess who it always is?
Yeah.
It's always that voice.
Just another line on page 9. I don't know where you were, Greg, there, but
yeah, that was on 12.
Okay, just a little bit before. The moment he says, "Don't think about it." Now, once I got to the "don't think about it," I think, are you joking? Of course I'm going to think about it. But then he said, "Just notice it."
Yeah.
Now that's a whole different thing from not thinking about something. But actually the noticing, this kind of non-active action, if you can have a non-active action of just noticing. But that takes a whole new sort of take on being able to at least, as I was trying to follow through with the book, to from like you said, Lynn, just being able to take it out. Well, that's one thing. But then the very act of, like, it is the other person or the other entity, if you like, that just notices. So somehow that the just noticing keeps me in on the action. It keeps me on the, well, I'm not really doing nothing. I'm not just being nothing. I'm noticing. And that just sort of sways it round again, thinking of that in coaching and in the questions we ask. You ask a question, say, just notice how. And that that's a great starter for taking a step back. Just notice it. Rather than, forget about it. Which I think we were saying before I don't know if we were saying it actually recorded or we were saying just before we started, something like, you can't just not think about it. And I remember my dad would say to me, like when Mum was ranting on about something, he would just say, just ignore it. But like, you can't just ignore it when it's your voice in your head. But you can notice it, and that somehow takes the effort out of it. It's a first step. Just notice it.
For me too, the idea of noticing, it means you're not judging, you're not hypothesizing, you're not trying to solve anything or figure anything out. You're just observing. It's pure observation, just noticing.
Without, and it's for me, it's this, and at the same time, acknowledging that indeed you actually can't take any of those parts away, but maybe you can separate them out.
Yeah, I think the noticing, when I came across that here, what that did for me was that it took away the necessity to do. To pay attention or to actually do anything. Just that.
It's interesting that what you said, Elaine, about coaching questions things, because when Jamie asks somebody, he notices that they're in a reflective state or they're whatever, and he goes, "Oh, what are you noticing?" And most of the time when they answer, they don't describe what it is that they're noticing. Their response is an evaluation of what they've noticed.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like there's something there, I think, in terms of helping people navigate to a state of noticing that's free of judgment, free of evaluation.
Yeah. And I also sort of tongue-in-cheeky says, well, if you watch it objectively, you will come to see that much of what the voice says is meaningless. Like, yes, thank you very much. All these years of talking to yourself, God, you haven't learned anything yet. It means nothing.
Yeah.
And then he says, most of the talking is just a waste of time and energy. And this is the bit that I love. The truth is that most of life will unfold in accordance with forces far outside your control, regardless of what your mind says about it. It's like sitting down at night and deciding whether you want the sun to come up in the morning. The bottom line is the sun will come up and the sun will go down. How simple is that?
Yeah.
Here and now.
Here and now.
Here and now.
I just shared that today, this morning, actually, with a client when she was talking about worrying. She was worrying about something that hasn't yet happened. And I read this line to her, and she got a bit quiet. And what she came back with was all the things that she has worried about that haven't happened, but other than that the things that were going on anyway, regardless. The person involved didn't know she was thinking that. The thing didn't happen. Loads of things. And it's just like, oh, yeah, going on all the time.
Yeah. Singer says, eventually you will see that the real cause of problems is not life itself. It's the commotion the mind makes about life that really causes problems.
Yeah, that speaks well.
And then the mental voice talks for the same reason that a tea kettle whistles. That is, there's a buildup of energy inside that needs to be released.
I like that. That resonated with me in moments of not just the mental voice, but when something comes out of my mouth when I need to release energy, and it's probably not the time to do so. That really struck a chord where there's this build up, and it's like, well, I just have to get this out. Well, what happens if you don't? Oftentimes the result is much more fruitful.
I think for me too, there's an element of getting it out, but not having to pay attention to it. Right. I did one of the things I did with Ollie when I was training and stuff. I forget what video it was, but there's something to do with I can't remember what they call it, scream therapy or something, like as a release. And I remember telling my son, because he was home, and I said, "Okay, I'm going in the basement, and I'm gonna be screaming like at the top of my lungs. I'm okay. Like, don't be alarmed when you hear me just go, ah, And I did that for a few minutes. I felt great, like the release of energy. It's kind of like this tea kettle thing. I just proverbially took my kettle off the burner. And or the kettle ran out of water, so there was no more steam. But just that release of stuff, it felt great.
Yeah.
But I didn't make any meaning of it or wonder like, oh, where did that come from, or what was all that about? It was just, our ability just to do something simple like that and release a whole bunch of built up energy. It just amazed me at how simple a process that was.
I'm not quite sure what page this on, but the next thing that I had that struck me was, what you experience is a personal presentation of the world according to you, rather than a stark, unfiltered experience of what is really out there. And I mean, in terms of what we have all been looking at and learning over the past few years, that seemed to be a rather accurate description of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if it's because of all the training in the principles and how we're living through the principle of thought. But if I'd read this book before all the principle stuff, what I have been is accepting of this as kind of verbatim fact. It was like because when I read that, I highlighted that sentence too. It was like, of course, like that's exactly what's going on. Separate realities. We're not experiencing the world as it is. We're experiencing the world as we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, Greg. I don't know. I started this book a very long time ago. I can't remember when. And I remember I started and I didn't get all the way through. And literally when I started this time months ago, I couldn't put it down. Yeah. The difference was, because it was just all landing differently. Makes total sense. Makes total sense.
So it's basically you recreate the outside world inside yourself, and then you live in your mind.
Yeah.
Reality is just too real for most of us, so we temper it with the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's amazing in these first, I don't know, this is like 18 pages, which is probably not even 18 pages of writing, so however they number the pages, but it's like, a very clear way of understanding and connecting with who you really are, a really clear and connected way to understand separate realities. And it's like, if you just ripped out those 18 pages and that's all you took away from this book, it would be like life-changing.
It would be more than enough.
Yeah.
But we're not going to stop there. The last thing I highlighted is that true personal growth is about transcending the part of you that is not okay and needs protection.
Yeah.
And to me, when I read that sentence, I think like who you really are is okay and needs no protection. So you're transcending that part of you that thinks it does need protection.
Yeah.
And that part of you that's not who you are. You are the one who observes that part.
Yeah. And the one inside who's aware that you're always talking to yourself is always silent. Yeah.
Anything else to add before we wrap up chapter 1?
Well, I think it's worthwhile just reading the very last sentence.
The very last sentence,
yes. Come to know the one who watches the voice, and you will come to know one of the great mysteries of creation.
Beautiful. All right, next time, chapter 2, your inner roommate.
Gets on to the fun bits.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.